I'm Steve McAllister, and this is the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bead Gaming. When this episode drops, Alberta's regulated sports betting and iGaming market will have just passed the 1 week mark. So far, 18 companies, the majority of which are well-known brands in the gaming space, are live, with 23 websites legally operating, including the AGLC's Play Alberta product. The man in the middle of Canada's second regulated gambling market, Dan Keene, makes his return to the podcast today. The Chief Executive Officer of the Alberta iGaming Corporation joins us some 85 hours into Alberta's new world as we recorded this show on Thursday, July 16th. Dan, thanks very much for being here with us.
Oh, great to be here, Steve. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Hey, Dan, just want to start with, have you had a chance to catch your breath yet?
Yeah, it's been a busy week, Steve, no doubt. I mean, it's been a busy number of months, right, leading up to market opening on Monday. So it's been exciting to be part of it. And, now we're kind of transitioning. It's like a new chapter where you transition from the build and the things that go into that, the consultation, into the operations side of things, right? And so, no, it's been exciting and still, of course, a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, it was, I'm really glad I made the trip to Edmonton last week for the market launch. Obviously, a lot of excitement and having Minister Dale Nally there, and both you and Dale did press conference in the morning, and then obviously at the launch event, and then SBC had a reception later in the day. So a lot of buzz around market launch. I just wanted to ask you, Dan. I know that AiGC, you're still kind of building your new offices, but I'm just wondering, can you take our audience a bit behind the scenes, kind of on the weekend, just talking to various operators? And Minister Nally joked at one of the events about placing his first bet at 12:04 a.m. on Monday morning. And I just wonder, was there like a barrage of messages over Slack or WhatsApp, or what did the weekend leading to market launch look like for you and your team at AiGC?
Well, I would say busy. It was busy, Steve, and probably goes without saying. I mean, look, working very closely with our regulator, AGLC, who did a tremendous job. And, I credit the staff at AiGC for all the work there, because, there's a lot of requirements and there's a lot of work that goes into those requirements, and a lot of work by our operators to make sure that everybody's singing off the same song sheet and that we all have compliance relative to our standards and policies in the agreement for the betterment of all Albertans that are going to be participating. Look, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a tremendous team effort. And you're right, Steve. I think your inclination is correct. There was a lot of dialogue over the weekend leading up to it, because of all the T's to cross and I's to dot. And just making sure that all diligence is done correctly. And it was really a big effort on behalf of the regulator and AiGC and our operators and our operating partners, right, to mutually bring the amount of folks to the market that we did on early Monday morning.
I feel like you and I have been, in the same pair of shoes. I mean, when I was working in the sports media business and being managing editor at the Globe Mail and Yahoo, you're always, praying that the tech is going to work. At Yahoo especially, we tended to recreate websites and have special IT elements in place when an Olympic Games took place. And I'm thinking that might have been one of your places where you're crossing your fingers and toes and everything else that the tech's going to work come Monday at 12:01.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, right? You've got your eyes on the tech to make sure it's all working correctly, and compliant relative to the geofencing, and then you've got your systems. You've got your systems both internal and through our regulator, right? And examples being our AML system, and making sure that it's of course working correctly. It's of paramount importance to the AiGC and to Albertans, and the passing of privacy information and the regulations and the standards behind POPA and what we need to do to be adherent to that. So there's just a number of things, Steve, that was really a checklist, a long checklist and a detailed checklist that is required on behalf of ourselves, our regulator, and our operators. And the tech is a big part of that, right? And I've been involved with tech launches as well. And, I'm not an IT expert, but I know enough. I know enough, Steve, to know when it comes to these updates and when you're going into production, there's a lot of things that can happen, right? So That's why, you need the proper QA and the proper testing and the penetration testing and all those things to make sure that you do have stability and you do have confidence in what's going to market. So yeah, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work.
Was there a point on Monday where you had a conversation, or you took a moment by yourself, or you're able to let out a sigh of relief that, again, this is a long process. I want to get to that in a second, but at the same time, getting to Monday, that's an incredible milestone, a huge milestone for you and the AiGC staff and people at AGLC and the provincial government in Alberta. But was there kind of that moment where you were able to say, okay, yeah, we got to the finish line?
Oh, for sure, Steve. I mean, listen, I'm just part of it, and I really do credit the team. And listen, folks that have been both with Service Alberta and within the industry for years, going back, right? The work that was done on the legislation, the passing of Bill 48, all of the elements that go into the culmination of July 13th, 2026. And a lot of folks, both past and present, had their hands on this. People in industry, legal counsel, the industry at large, our operators, everybody really that has played a role. And yeah, I mean, it's a great milestone. Obviously, we'll be judged by Albertans, Steve. I'm kind of one of these people too. I don't like to pat ourselves on the back too much, because the reality is it's more like, we built the car, but now we got to drive the car. We got a long road ahead and we've got a long way to go. You can use whatever analogy you want, but that's great. And it is a fantastic accomplishment and it should be recognized. But honestly, I'm more focused on the future, right? The compliance and the diligence that we need to put into both the social responsibility, the anti-money laundering, the privacy, those things that are of key importance, and how we'll ultimately be judged by Albertans, right? So yeah, great accomplishment. Great to be able to cross that finish line. But at the same time, I would suggest the real work begins, right?
Yeah, and on that note, Dan, I thought a quote from Sanjeev Kad, the AiGC chair of the board of directors, really reflected that on Monday. It was something I mentioned in the newsletter. And I just want to read for our audience the quote. And it's, opening day is never the measure of success. Success comes from building something people have confidence in and want to be part of for the long term. And I thought that was one of the sound bites that really struck a chord with me given all the different press conferences and receptions on opening day.
Yeah, it's true though, Steve, right? And I've been part of, building of certain things and launching of certain things, maybe not on this scale in terms of opening a crown agency, but very important initiatives, both provincially and in my career. And I have to say, it's so true though, right? It's all about what's going to happen in the road ahead. How are we going to meet Albertans' requirements and demands? How are we going to meet and build a competitive industry that's healthy and for healthy players within the province, but also being mindful of the changes, if you will, within the iGaming space, whether it's prediction, whether it's betting exchanges or sweepstakes or things like this. I mean, it's an ever-changing industry, right, Steve? So thinking about how we have our eyes on the complexity of the industry, but also always thinking of how we can make improvements, anticipation towards what's coming, so that we can be prepared and support Albertans and support our operators in working with our regulator and our Service Alberta team. I mean, that's kind of where I've got my eyes.
As I mentioned, 18 companies went live on opening day. I think in Ontario it was 12 companies back in April of 2022. Just your thoughts on having that many companies ready to go to market right away.
Yeah, a tremendous response. 23 sites, as you say, Steve, when we include Play Alberta, and very, very happy with that number. But I have to say, what wasn't we look at the number, and that's a good thing, because we want to continue to focus on channelization, which is critically important, and keep the gray market out of Alberta and keep revenues in the province and protections and standards in the province with integrity. But at the same time, it was about making sure that the people that came to our market, it was done right, that it was done in compliance with our policies and our operating agreement and our standards in place by our regulator, right? That's really the most important thing. I'm glad we were able to get through that many folks, and I know they'll be good stewards of their business and good corporate citizens in Alberta. But the market's going to grow, Steve. There's more operators to come, and there's more folks that will join our marketplace, and we'll be excited to welcome folks that that go through due diligence and are compliant with our standards that we have in place.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Dan, I think there are around 50 website registrations prior to market launch. And I did speak with one operator at the SPC event on the Monday evening, and they mentioned that their plan is to launch in September, that they were still going through some compliance issues in that registration process. Do you expect, will there be a certain cadence to subsequent operators going live, Dan? Like, do you think there'll be a bit of quiet now and then we'll see a bit of a rush later this summer and into the fall?
Well, I think it's going to be busy, Steve. I think it's going to be busy, especially between now and October 13th. Look, AGLC has provided guidance around, post October 13th. If you're not in the legal market in Alberta, you're going to be hearing from the AGLC, our regulator, and AiGC will be monitoring that as well. We've already got, some measures in place to provide compliance, if you will, relative to the illegal market versus the legal market. But to answer the question, Steve, absolutely, it'll be busy with some new operators. I don't like to assume that all the operators that have applied will get here. As I mentioned, they have to go through the process. They need to be vetted. They need to be approved by AGLC, and then they have to adhere to us as the conduct and manage entity. But I think you're going to see, my prediction would be probably a doubling of that number or close to it by October 16th, depending upon the compliance and their success in passing, all the barriers is the wrong word, all the requirements that are required to be in our market.
2022 was definitely a different time, Dan. We were still going through COVID, so there's still obviously those precautions being taking place from a public health standpoint. But I do wonder, just being in Edmonton for market launch, just the investment that companies were making on market launch, not just on the product side, but seeing, I had an opportunity to speak to Paul Lieberman, one of the co-founders of DraftKings, at an event on the Monday afternoon. And Scott Woodgate from BetMGM and Johan Matthews and several BetMGM people at the event, Scott Vanderwell from PointsBet, just kind of representation from the industry. And does that kind of reflect the kind of investment and commitment you're seeing to Alberta?
Yeah, I think certainly, Steve. I mean, Alberta's an attractive market, right? We know the economy is strong. We know we've, and our thanks to IGO and the folks in Ontario in terms of blazing the trail, right? Because they've been very gracious and very supportive of what we've done, and they really set the mark and the bar very high. And we've been, very fortunate to be able to work alongside them, along with the industry, along with our operators, along with our legal counsel, Osler, and others that have supported us in this process, Steve. But yeah, the interest has been tremendous. And I'd like to think that, Alberta's business friendly, right? We've got low provincial income tax. We've got a high disposable income. We've got a strong demographic here, strong immigration, interprovincial immigration, and strong industries. And, it's going to continue to be that way. And I think it's obviously very important. It's critically important in terms of the health. And I think we've seen it with the interest from many of the operators, both national operators, local operators, or global operators, right? And that's tremendously exciting.
Yeah, I'll mention FanDuel too, because FanDuel, feels to me has invested pretty heavily on the marketing side with their Thrill Alberta campaign and having kind of boots on the ground around the Calgary Stampede now. So that's another big name operator. Is your iGaming platform ready for Alberta? Bead Gaming is ready to support your new market entry with a SOC 2 compliant platform, multi-tenant infrastructure model, and unlimited configurability. Future-proof your iGaming performance today with a solid foundation for your next province. Bead Gaming is your partner for success. Get in touch at beadgaming.com. You mentioned iGaming Ontario, Dan, and if lessons learned may be the most popular catchphrase in Gaming News Canada over the past month, and I do look at what you and the AiGC team has done from a communication standpoint, and very proactive right from the get-go on social media and getting talking about AiGC's role and educating people about the new market and educating people about responsible gaming. I think that, the website that the AiGC launched not that long ago is very thorough in explaining your role and giving people direction on where to go with it, whether it's regards to problem gambling or simply wanting to see what the marketplace looks like. But how much of a priority was that with you and your team to make sure that you there was good communication right from launch day?
Well, it's critically important, Stephen. Let me just say, a corporation is like a human. We're not perfect, and we're not going to do everything perfectly. But I can assure you that we're going to be here to listen and learn and work and grow and do our very best every day in and day out. And the Minister Nally has really given us a great vision and great mandate under Bill 48, and Ontario has provided, like I said, a tremendous benchmark and high watermark in terms of what works and we've obviously adopted a lot of that, but this is Alberta and we're going to take an Alberta approach. And there were certain things that we did in terms of communication. We obviously had a campaign where we're trying to inform Albertans about what the AiGC is, why do we exist, and to look for our logo, because when you see our logo, that means you're playing on a site that's been accredited by Responsible Gambling Council, by the way, and also a site that has the integrity measures and the diligence of our regulator and our own standards and operating agreement in place to protect Albertans, to protect your money, to protect your privacy, and that you have somewhere to go. Of course, you can go to our approved operators, but you can come to the AiGC if you have questions. And it was important for us, Steve, to let Albertans know about why we exist, right? And why it's important, because, to play within your limits and that gambling should be something to be deemed as a fun entertainment activity, not as a way to make money. And that some of the revenues, a portion of the revenues benefit, we know, 2% to First Nations, 1% to social responsibility, and that net profits and net revenues go to the general revenue fund to support services Albertans rely on every day. But I would say too, Steve, it really gives us an opportunity, and you touched on it, to talk about the social responsibility, to talk about the tools that are available. AGLC has done a great job with centralized self-exclusion from the get-go, which was a critical pillar mandated by Minister, which I wholeheartedly agree with, and very proud of AGLC for that implementation. And I would say also that we've had some other measures in place around, the advertising, the tools that are available for social responsibility, our partnership with 211 Alberta, and subsequently Brick House, which is a place for treatment and recovery for Albertans that they can go to if they're seeking more support. And that's critically important, Stephen. Without that communication, we wouldn't have the opportunity to get that message out there. Otherwise, it's just, these operators are here, and what does this all mean, right? And so those messages are critically important and will continue to be.
Dan, just on follow up on that, you've been in this industry a long time. You're certainly aware of the noise that's out there right now. There's a bill going through the federal government right now to ban sports betting advertising. We see a lot of media coverage on problem gambling, coverage that governments aren't doing enough to regulate gambling, trying to put tighter guardrails in place. Like how do you react to all the coverage? And again, I think it's we always try to remind people on this podcast is that gambling's been around for a long time. Online gambling's been around for the better part of 25 years now. But as someone who's been in the industry a long time, what do you say to people when they say, like, why would you allow all these companies to come in and encourage people to gamble?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say, Stephen, you touched on it, is online gambling isn't new to Alberta, and we're not here to grow the online gaming market. We're here to channelize and put standards and regulations around it. Look, you're right. I have had an interest and been involved in the industry for a couple of decades now, and I would say, actually a little more than that, I think, but I would say, Steve, that I had my first account almost 2 decades ago online, and so this isn't new. It's existed for decades in Alberta. So do we leave it unchecked? Do we leave Albertans unprotected? Do we leave it without a standardization of responsible gaming measures? Our minister has said no, and our government has said no, and I couldn't agree more. The reality is let's protect Albertans. Let's provide the services and support. Let's keep some of those revenues in Alberta. And it's critically important, Steve. It's not something that has just been manufactured. It's been here for a long time. And I will say too, Steve, AiGC is going to be on the forefront of social responsibility. We are continuing to work with our partners at AGRI, which is the Alberta Gaming Research Institute. We're going to continue to work with our partners. We met this week with Responsible Gambling Council, and Sarah over there have been tremendous partners for us. And we're going to work with industry because we see what's happening globally, right? We see what OLG has done with their mandatory deposit limits, if you will, for that certain age bracket. I believe it's 19 to 25. But we see too, Steve, what's happening globally in Australia and in the UK and in the Netherlands. And we have to say to ourselves, what can we do as an industry that is going to continue to protect Albertans? What's best for Albertans? Because what we don't want to do is just do something for the sake of doing it. We want to work with industry. We want to work with our providers to understand how can we best safeguard and protect Albertans and keep the industry strong and competitive and healthy so that people that do choose to participate do so in a responsible fashion. And as far as advertising, Steve, look, there are measures in place that are very specific around, as you know, of course, about non-direction towards minors. We put some other specific policies in place about making sure that operators use the age gating tools that are available through social media so that we're directing ads only to those patrons that are of legal age within Alberta. And folks that do self-exclude, that they come off those marketing lists and aren't part of the advertising campaigns that go on. So there are a lot of measures in place, and we have to tell that story. But remember, look for the AIGC logo. When you see those ads, you know you're playing on a site, if it's got the AIGC logo, that's a legal site and a site that is got those standards in place and protections for Albertans.
I remember when the Ontario market launched, Dan, there was the AGCO took action against several operators around inducements in the early days, and I think there was some confusing. Just a little bit of confusion around the regulations that have been put into place by the AGCO and operators not quite understanding their role in monitoring that. I would think that given all the talk around advertising right now, and we saw it with a lot of the media reports coming out of Alberta on market launch last week, that's something that the AGLC and AIGC and other stakeholders will be paying close attention to in the early days. Because again, as a legal regulated marketplace, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that there is going to be a lot of money spent on advertising and marketing campaigns as operators come into this market.
Yeah, well, I think that's true, Steve, and we're seeing it to a degree, and operators are going to compete, and like other industries, and the reality is our job at AIGC is to, and along with AGLC, our regulators, to enforce our standards that we have in place, which are comprehensive, by the way, as I mentioned. But in addition to we also have full audit rights, right? If there's something that we see that looks to be offside or against the policies or standards, we'll act, just like the AGLC will. Part of our role as a conduct and manage entity really is as an auditing entity, right? To make sure that there is adherence to our policies and procedures. And look, we've talked to our operators. We've got tremendous operators, and we know that they're off to a great start in terms of making sure that those standards are applied in the correct fashion. I have full confidence that they'll continue to do that. But if we have to have a word or we have to have a discussion, we'll have those discussions, Steve. But it's part of to me, it's just part of the role of both the AGLC as our great regulator and the AIGC.
And I think it's really important to point out too, Dan, that on the day we record this interview, Chorus Entertainment has announced major cuts to their global news staff in both Calgary and Edmonton. And the week, I think, in just days leading up to market launch, we learned that Rogers was canceling, closing down 6 radio stations across the country, including the All Sports radio station in Calgary. So revenues from a legal industry like this are really important at a time in media where we're seeing we live in a country right now where there is a shrinking media, and I don't think that's not a road we want to be going down.
As I mentioned, Steve, the industry, like I come from Molson Breweries, by the way. I had the pleasure of working there in 4 provinces for 8 years. And, I can't help but think about that industry when I think about the gaming industry. And the reality is, there's standards in place through Think TV, through CRTC and other organizations in terms of how advertising can be conducted. There's also, as I mentioned, Steve, very strict standards in terms of the approach that advertising can take place here. And our focus at AiGC is on, again, looking for that logo, looking for what it means, how we can educate Albertans and protect Albertans. But operators are going to compete. They're going to compete as they would. Alberta's a business-friendly province, and those businesses are going to compete. We're just going to make sure they compete in the fashion that is permissible within our standards and our regulations, because it is all of our duties to make sure that those requirements are met and followed stringently. And I want to reiterate, Steve, AiGC is going to be on the front foot with regards to social responsibility. I would suggest to our industry to expect consultation, because it will happen relative to measures that will be coming relative to social responsibility because of the industry's ever-changing mechanics. I'll give some examples, Steve, right? Like the buy a bonus games and things that come up in prediction markets. We as an industry can't sit still and say, well, we've got these standards and that's all we're going to do. I mean, we would never do that, especially in this industry, right? We have to understand, how are these new mechanics, how are these new games impacting folks that are of legal age, any player, right? And what are we doing to make those players aware of what that type of gambling could mean? What services and features from a responsible gaming measure can we bring forward to help protect those players and support those players? Look, Canadian Gaming Association has been tremendous partners and others, and we're going to continue to work with the industry to, like I say, be progressive in that arena.
Is there a role for AiGC to play with VIP programs, which are somewhat controversial, and people will point to as that can be a place where that doesn't that maybe isn't doing enough around problem gambling? Does AiGC have any kind of a role with that, Dan?
Well, I can tell you this, Steve. We get access to all the data, right? And we have full auditable rights, if you will. So certainly we'll be having conversations with our operators about how they conduct their business, and understand that we expect operators to be great stewards of Albertans and Albertans' business. But at the same time, like I say, it's a market that will need to be competitive. It's a market that'll need to be supported. But to answer your question, Steve, of course we'll be keeping close watch on how operators are conducting themselves, and working with our regulator at the AGLC on a number of these matters.
I want to give you an opportunity here to talk about self-exclusion.ca, to the website that's been set up, even though I know AGLC oversees that. But again, I think that might be, if it's not the most important initiative around market launch, it certainly is the top three. And again, going back to lessons learned, we saw in Ontario, it took 4 years to get a centralized self-exclusion program. That's something that's going to be in place in Alberta day one. So I think that's a really important anchor when it comes to that social responsibility piece that you're talking about.
Steve, it's absolutely critical. And I really credit AGLC, who's done an unbelievable job with that, and the industry and our minister for, mandating that that's in place day one. Look, I'm going to have the numbers not exactly correct here, but in my previous life, the research that I saw is that an average Albertan that chooses to play on an online gaming site will play on average on 4.3 sites. So let's just say that that's a correct number and it's open to interpretation, but let's say I do play on 4 sites or 5 sites. I don't know about you, Steve. I'm getting a lot of emails and passwords, and my older age, it's getting tougher to remember every single password and email that I have for what I'm signed up for. So the ability to go to one site with one self-exclusion from all these sites is critical. It's critical because we know, quite honestly, you might have signed up for a site at some time in the past and had forgotten about it or didn't know or what have you. So being able to make it streamlined, be able to make it effective like that to help protect Albertans, and they can choose 6 months to 3 years depending on what it is absolutely important. It's not just important, it's foundational. Yeah.
Hey, Dan, in terms of the monthly reporting that's going to happen, I just wonder, how much information will AiGC release to the public? And again, this is a bit of a self-serving question, but obviously when I talk to my colleagues in the media, people like Jeff Zakodny and Tom Nightingale and others, I mean, it's something that's usually comes up in our conversations at various conferences. But I just wonder what that might look like. And in fact, when do you see AiGC putting out your first report?
So we're going to work with industry and already had some discussions on that, and obviously work very closely with industry and work closely with CGA and others in terms of what we do there. Steve, look, I would say a bit of a spoiler alert. It'll probably be the crawl, walk, run. We're not going to come out with all this information, right, on the first 2 weeks of operations. As a matter of fact, because of that October 13th date, and with really our first quarter being July, August, September, you're probably going to see a quarterly report sometime in October. And then from there, you're likely to see more information. But we're going to explore it, Steve. We want to be mindful, of course, of industry and anything that we're providing, not, of course, being absolutely 100% adherence to our privacy regulation, but also, you've got to think about competitive imbalance. But we want to share information. We want to share information, and we're just not in a position today to talk about exactly what we're going to be sharing or how we're going to do it. But we'll be investigating aggressively, Steve, what we can share that is meaningful to both industry and to the market as a whole, right? So you'll see more as we go. I think I would articulate it that way.
Yeah, well, I'm more than happy to provide some advice around that, Dan.
Happy to hear it. Happy to hear it, Steve.
I'm not so sure about that. Hey, Dan, just a couple more questions. Sure. You saw a lot of people on July 13th, and I just wonder what sticks out to you in terms of the feedback and the conversations that you had from that first day.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are excited, right? Because the talk, as we mentioned, Steve, has been on for a few years, to say the least, right? So I think folks are excited. I think people understand Alberta and Albertans, demand quality and demand integrity, and understand, what the market is about. And so we've seen operators, get really engrossed in Alberta and hire folks in Alberta, which we always encourage, by the way. Because Alberta is a place where people like to know you face to face, right? We're very much a large community that's small. I like to say people know each other in this province, and it's important that folks are good stewards of their business here. But no, people are very excited, and I think Albertans are excited to take part in a regulated space and a place that can be competitive and have their choice. It is their choice of how they choose to participate. We just always encourage them to participate in a responsible fashion and within their means. But no, Steve, I think overall the operators and the industry is very excited at this time. And again, for me, it's more about that's tremendous, and I love the excitement. But I'm really excited about the next 3, 6 months, a year, in terms of where is the market going to go? How's our channelization rate? How are we getting use of social responsibility tools and those messages out there? And how are we protecting Albertans' funds and privacy, right? Those are the things we're focused on at AiGC.
Hey, final question. I just wonder what's kind of at the top of your to-do list for the next, for the rest of the summer?
Well, like I say, it's going to be about making sure our systems are in place, Steve, and are correct, that our reporting is correct, that our duties as the reporting entity on AML are absolutely correct, and that we have, all our diligence in place. And I would also say, I guess, 2 things, Steve, that we're continuing, and we will do a survey of Albertans to understand, how do Albertans feel? Because as I mentioned, we'll be judged by Albertans. We're not going to judge ourselves. We're going to be judged by our operators and by Albertans, primarily by Albertans, in terms of their satisfaction, their awareness, their use of the tools, their use of the products, and what questions they have, and how effectively we're here to serve, Steve. Our job is to serve Albertans, and so we'll be judged by Albertans and by our ministry, and that's an incredible privilege, and I know all staff at AiGC recognize that, and that's where we'll be focused. And it'll be exciting, right? It'll be exciting to see what happens, but we've got a lot of work to do with our regulator, AGLC, to make sure that the market is running correctly, and so kind of like we never sleep, Steve. We're very meticulous and very dedicated to making sure that the things are done the way they need to be done as prescribed in our policies and our agreements.
Hey, and when do you hope to open your new offices?
yeah, we're going to have a new office hopefully sometime in September. You know, I might move over into October, and we've got a great number of folks. We've got over 50 folks that have been hired that are full-time now with the AiGC. It's just a privilege to work with that team. And, you know, we'll continue to hire up as need be, bring consultants in as need be, Steve, to make sure that we're doing things correctly. But yeah, we should be in our new office come October, let's say. And so we look forward to welcoming operators and yourself out to our office when we have that open.
That's terrific. Dan Keene is the CEO of the Alberta iGaming Corporation. Dan, I just want to make sure I get it right. If the website is abigaming.ca.
That's correct, Steve.
Okay. Again, anyone wanting to learn more information about the Alberta market who hasn't been paying close attention, strongly suggest you go to their website. Hey, Dan, I know you're really, really busy, and I really appreciate you making the time to do this 4 days after market launch. Wish you and the staff at AiGC the very best, and look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Yeah, likewise, Steve. It was a pleasure to see you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Great. That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada Show presented by Beat Gaming. As always, you can listen to this show on the various podcast apps. You can also watch my conversation with Dan on the GNC YouTube channel. Thanks again to all of our listeners and viewers for supporting this show, and we'll see everybody again very soon.
Take care.